All right, hello and welcome to the next HRI Insider webinar. Today we've got Dante with the Toronto Health and Safety Consulting. He's going to be taking us through navigating the complexities of WCBs, protecting your claim and making that claim in the first place, and kind of all the questions you might have along the way. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation. I'm going to join him midway through to kind of go through a few kind of interesting scenarios. But at this point, I will ask Dante to turn on his camera and join us. You might remember him from a couple months ago. Hey, Dante.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, fantastic. Good to see you again.
Nice,
Um,
likewise.
this is where I read your bio, so there we go. Dante Mancuso has been practicing HR and safety for over 7 years. Graduating from Trent University, he put his HR specialization designation to quick use by joining an HR consulting firm. As a consultant, he has helped hundreds of businesses navigate the complexity of managing people and legal compliance. Working hand in hand with top law firms, medical professionals, and industry influencers, he has built a proven recipe that builds quick, simple, and compliant safety programs. That is an intro, but well deserving. Thank you so much, Dante, for
Thank you
joining us
kindly.
again.
Thank you kindly.
So yeah, I will throw it over to you. Please impart your wisdom, and I'll join you later.
Well, thank you for that wicked intro. Welcome everybody to our second podcast here, second webinar, hopefully second of many to come. I hope that a lot of us here got to enjoy the first one. If not, like we had mentioned before, you can always see that on the HREI's YouTube channel and their member benefit section. Last time we chatted was about the 5 main core components of building your own health and safety program. We gave a lot of tips on do-it-yourself techniques or other things that you could put into place very quickly, easily in your business and start building your safety infrastructure. We also went through a couple of things on what does a safety program actually look like and what does a good job look like. And we also went over some tips and techniques on how to deal with the Ministry of Labor, how to prepare yourself for a Ministry of Labor visit or inspection, and some of the nuances around how the ministry can visit your workplace and everything surrounding that. So we had a very great discussion, a lot of great questions, and it was truly a pleasure. Today, we're going to take a secondary spin on your safety program, but this time really focusing on the incident and the WSIB or the WCBs, the Workers' Compensation Boards. They have different names in different provinces. I'm mainly based out of Ontario. So if you hear me refer to these worker compensation boards as WSIB, I do apologize, but it is just kind of in my nature. I deal with them on a daily, hourly basis at times. And so for today's session, we're going to try to make it short and sweet. I do feel that a lot of business owners understand the basics of how to register and how to pay their bills. I want to focus some time today on what happens when a worker gets injured. When do we need to report it to the WSIB or the WCBs? What kind of documentation and forms? But most importantly, through my career, I found that managing this return to work program when an individual does get hurt, injured on site, or they become ill due to various factors, how do we as a company manage the return to work process in two kind of lenses? The first lens is, how do we make sure that the worker can make it back to their pre-injury duties? How do we kind of build them a course or guide them along a journey to recover themselves? And secondary, how do we minimize our cost as business owners or business leaders? And how can we kind of do both at the same time? And that's what today's session is about. I also want to share some of the techniques that I've learned over the years that not every business owner or manager is aware of. Different techniques around different styles of injuries and how to bring individuals back to work, how to deal with individuals who don't want to work with you or cooperate with the return to work, and how to navigate with WSIB and how to bring three parties, the employer, the injured worker, and the workers' compensation boards, and how all three work together as a team, as opposed to being enemies or being upset with any decision rendered, or working alongside workers that you may not have the most positive experience with. So just getting started, a little bit about Toronto Health and Safety Consultants. We were established in 2021. Myself, I've been working in the HR and health and safety world for over 7 years now, starting in the consulting path, working with dozens and hundreds of companies throughout all of Canada, a lot of franchises, a lot of construction firms. Pretty much I worked everything from aerospace CNC to waste management and everything in between. From an I apologize for that. From an entire perspective, from your HR leadership management side, all the way down to building health and safety programs, from the workers all the way to working with employers. From there, I had joined a group of companies called the Renomado Group of Companies and leading their HR and health and safety programs. It wasn't long before the owners decided that the recipe truly does work and we wanted to bring it to the outside world. About half a year later, we sparked up some conversations with the HRAI, and we found that some of the services that we could provide mimicked the value system of the HRAI contractors, warehouses, vendors, manufacturers, and together we put a program in place that members of the HRAI are entitled to discounts and specialty programs that are only available to this membership, and they're not available, to the regular customers or the, off the street type of customers. There's a lot of information on that on the HRAI website. There's information on that on the Toronto Health and Safety Consultants website, showing you some of the different value added that we want to bring and as part of this partnership with the HRAI. From there, enough intro about me. I do like to speak fast, and I do like to go through content. I do respect the time that we all have here today and that you're giving me some of your time during your lunch hour. And I want to make sure that it's as much value to you as possible and not talking about me the whole time. So firstly, just to go over some different demographics here, I picked British Columbia in 2021. They have really good data and information, as you can see here. Injured workers, 58% male, 42% female. The average age of the workers injured on the job was 42 years old. 12% of injured workers were under 25 years old. 22% were over 55 years old. I'm a big proponent and I'm a big pusher for building safety programs with the youth employment. There's a lot of additional stress for people starting their very first job. My rule of thumb is people will adopt to the workplace culture that already exists. So if the workplace culture is very safe, people are wearing their hair nets, people are wearing their hard hats, safety boots, and fall protection equipment, then you're more likely to have new workers mimic that type of behavior. Likewise, if people are acting dangerous, even safe individuals in an effort to, get along with their coworkers and fit in, even the safest worker can become unsafe, and likewise, or the opposite, a unsafe worker can become safe if the workplace culture is safe, and most people will mimic a workplace culture as a new worker in an effort to fit in. 5 most common workplace injuries, which is repeated throughout all kinds of health and safety training. Slip, trips, and falls is number 1. Repetitive stress and overexertion, think of lifting, back pain, things like that. Struck or caught in moving machinery, vehicle-related incidents, which includes forklifts and elevated working platforms, and then fire and explosion-related injuries. And I'm sure a lot of individuals here on this call can relate that most of their workplace injuries will typically fall in this type. Maybe with a laceration, a cut, or a slice being one of them. However, usually most of the injuries, even personally with that I deal with, will fall into these 5 right here. Getting right into it, we'll go through a little bit of administration or just some general information about the WCBs and WSIB. But I really want to spend a lot of time here today talking about an example of a worker injury, how we report that. And secondly, I want to talk about some of the incentive programs throughout all the different provinces in Ontario, and just a little bit of tidbit information. In some provinces, you could get 10 to 20% back rebate on your WSIB insurance premiums. Here in Ontario, for large employers, you can get a rebate on your WSIB premiums up to $250,000. So there's a lot of money in incentive programs that are available to employers. And I wanted to share some of this information because not everybody knows that they exist. And the first thing to do is be aware of what is available, and how THSC can help, collect that money for you. But also on our campaign of awareness is how can you also do it yourself within your own teams, so you're not spending more resources to get some of those WCB resources back. Just real quick, the purpose is it provides a no-fault collective liability insurance and access to industry-specific health and safety information for employers. So the no-fault collective liability means that if you report an injury to the WSIB, you're not going to be fined. You're not going to receive criminal charges because you needed to use insurance because an individual got hurt. Now, there is also, the Occupational Health and Safety Act and its regulations, which, may put criminal liabilities for, individuals who are negligent. But when it comes to reporting workplace injuries and workers seeking insurance to recover, whether that be for providing loss of earning benefits or healthcare coverage for workers. That's the purpose of this insurance program. And the no fault is built to not reward, but to make employers, use the program. If you were at fault, a lot of people would just sweep it under the rug. So that's where the no fault comes into play. And thirdly, they provide support for the return to work after the injury or illness has occurred. And sometimes injuries are simple. Worker can be off of work for 1 or 2 days or no days and be back to regular work or modified duties. But some injuries are a little bit larger or a little bit more severe in nature and require more in-depth, progressive return to work plan. And these compensation boards have specialists in place to help employers facilitate. And for today's mission, we want to show that these compensation boards, whether it's WSIB, WCBs, or anywhere throughout Canada and the different provinces, are really here to help. And we're going to show you that through a couple different examples. Does my business need coverage? This is a question I get a lot, especially from small employers, or let's say an individual who only hires independent contractors and not necessarily employee status. So firstly, the simplest answer is if you employ workers, employees, T4 employees, then yes, you will need coverage. There's also mandatory coverage for some businesses. An example of that would be construction, some manufacturing, mines, quarries, oil wells, agriculture, forestry, transportation, sometimes in the trade and the retail trade, service, and public administration sectors. Now, every company is different size, shape, and form, and it's difficult for me from a Canadian-wide perspective here on this webinar to say whether you do or do not. However, each of the provincial websites has very in-depth questionnaires, contact numbers, details whether you do or do not need coverage. But I like to have rule of thumbs. If you employ workers, you should expect to have the WSIB, WCB coverages. And if you're in a high-risk industry, chances are you will need that as well. I know in Ontario, we have mandatory coverage for construction for sure, and we deal with that a lot. Moving forward, I want to go straight into discussing injuries. When someone does get hurt at work, what is the difference between applying first aid and a Band-Aid? Do I need to report everything to the WSIB that happens in my business? And there are 4 key components when we need to submit our accident reports and fill out this type of forms and documentations from these governing bodies. One is if the worker seeks medical attention. If your worker gets injured and they go to the hospital, the emergency room, their family doctor, they go get x-rays. And the reason why we would need to report that to the worker compensation boards is the medical professionals need to get paid. So for example, in Ontario, we have OHIP, and the doctor needs to know, are they going to get paid through the WSIB in Ontario or through OHIP? So as part of the insurance part, if your worker does seek medical attention, at that point as an employer, you would need to report that injury or that illness to the WSIB in Ontario, WCBs throughout other provinces. If the worker cannot report a work due to the injury, so that's if they miss work, which means that they lose money as a result of their injury, then they need to be compensated for their loss of earnings. Third would be if the worker requires modified duties for more than 7 calendar days. So there's times when a worker can, sprain or strain themselves, but they're still able to work. They're not going to the doctor. They're still coming into work every day. However, if this persists for over 7 days, then that can be indicative of a deeper issue, and you will need to report that. And fourth is if the modified work is less than regular pay. So you may have a skilled worker, we'll just choose, let's say a plumber, for example. If they sprain themselves, you may have them do light work like sweeping around the shop or filling out paperwork. If you decide to pay that individual less than their regular pay because they're not doing their high value work, at that point, that would be considered a loss of earnings. And at that point, you would need to report that to the worker compensation boards, and they would top up, so to speak, that worker's wage. So as an employer, you would pay a fair wage, let's say for someone sweeping, and the difference between what you're paying them on modified work to what their pre-injury rate would be covered by these insurance boards. Going through reporting injuries. So now we've determined, let's say the worker went to a doctor or went to the clinic. Now we need to report. Every province has its own names for the different types of reports, but in general, you have 3 baskets. the worker will make a report saying, I got injured this location at this time, and this is my injury. Then secondly, the employer needs to have a report validating that the worker did indeed get hurt at work and the information on the worker's report is true and accurate. And thirdly, if they go visit a doctor, the doctor will have a report. So in short, going through a quick example, the worker says, I lacerated my arm and I required stitches. Okay, to validate that that actually happened at work, the employer would write a report and say, yes, Dante did suffer a laceration doing this type of work in this workplace on this date, and this did happen at work. And third, the doctor report would substantiate that the event that led to the injury correlates to the medical requirements. So the doctor's point of the view would say, yes, there was a laceration and that did require stitches. So the first one is saying, step one says the worker says, I got hurt. The employer says, yes, it did actually happen, and validates the injury happened at work. And the third step, the doctor's report says, yes, the incident does relate to like action reaction. The incident that occurred that the employer says does fall in line with the actual medical injury that the worker is suffering through now. So those are the three pieces that WSIB or the worker compensation boards use to render a decision. There are two ways that you can report this to your worker compensation boards. You can fill out the required documents and submit them via fax, or you can use their online web portals. Typically, you will receive a confirmation letter. I know nowadays they're trying to go paper free, but until 2023, you will receive what they call a decision letter. And that decision letter will cover two main things. One, did they approve that the worker did get injured at work and that this is a workplace injury? And two, if the worker required medical treatment or if the worker had loss of earnings, this decision letter will tell you the WSIB or the Workers' Compensation Board of your province does agree the worker got injured, and they will pay for the medical treatments, for any medical and any loss of earnings that occurred. So you will get feedback from these boards telling you exactly what the decision is. Did they approve it or did they not? On the next page, it will also give you details on how to appeal the decision. So there may be various reasons why you would appeal a WSIB or a WCB decision letter. We'll go over that through some of the examples, but just to talk real quick right now, if you believe that the worker, for example, did not come into work because they didn't want to, and you offered them modified duties, and the worker simply didn't show up to work, if all of that information isn't provided to these boards, then they may pay that worker for downtime. And you can appeal that. You can also appeal the decisions, whether you believe the case is true, is factual, or if you do not believe that the worker's actual incident, reflects accurately what happened at the workplace, or if the injury happened at all in the first place. So you will receive a letter with very detailed procedures on how to make an appeal. You can appeal up to 3 times. Just as a small reminder that the worker can also appeal. So if WSIB or the WCB rejects this, the injury report and does not pay your worker, they are entitled to appeal that decision letter and collect the loss of earnings depending on further information that these boards may not have. Just going for a quick rule of thumb, I really like to use this rule of thumb when it comes to return to work. Every dollar WSIB or the WCB spends in loss of earnings will result in a 1.5 times cost reallocated to your company through increased premiums. This is a rule of thumb that I use to help make decisions, whether we offer less earnings on the modified work. It helps me build programs for getting workers back to work. So in your mind, if the worker loses $1,000 in salary, you should expect your WSIB premium over the next few years to increase by $1,500. Sometimes these numbers really help determine, what type of work to offer and how to navigate that return to work program. And as we all know, money is a crucial function of operating your business. And having this rule of thumb really helps kind of cultivate or understand exactly where and what to do and what the costs are in bringing this individual back to work. And it would also help communicate with your supervisors, your front-end supervisors who may not be overly thrilled with bringing in someone with modified duties, and would help, safety professionals, HR professionals, small business owners kind of relay the importance of reintegrating workers back to work. I know one of the facts, especially with back care, is the best way to, from a back strain to get back to regular work is to get back into the routine. Laying down on your couch watching Netflix all day doesn't help recover. So the return to work both is from a financial savings perspective, value added, but then on the other side actually helps your workers, your humans get better and healthier at work. I wanted to go through an example here. We got a fellow named Johnny, and we're going to be spending some of our time, I think I got about 10-15 minutes here. I think in the next 5 to 10 minutes, we're going to go through this example. If anyone has any questions or, wants to raise their hand, feel free to do so as we go forward. But I'm just going to lay out a little bit of a potential or an example here. So Johnny slips at work and hurts his back. So he's at work, he hurts his back, and he goes to the doctor the same day. And after going to see the doctor gives him a form, and Johnny accidentally throws away the form because he just grabbed a bunch of paperwork. He doesn't like to keep clutter in his car and throws away the doctor's form. He calls his employer and says, hey, I still feel good to work. I'm going to come in tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning happens, and Johnny calls in and says, hey, boss, you know what? I actually don't feel good now that I wake up. I'm going to take today off. And speaking on my experience, this happens a lot. And this is something that I forecast almost every workplace injury, no matter the severity. How the worker feels that day versus how they feel tomorrow morning is usually a very different story. And a lot of times when I work with organizations who are new to the safety world or new to reporting to the WSIB, we take the worker's word as truth and says, you know what, Johnny said he's going to come in tomorrow. Let's just wait for tomorrow to fill out any documentation paperwork, or let's wait till tomorrow to deal with this issue. And what happens is that Johnny's going to call in early in the morning the next day and say, hey, I don't feel good. And you as the employer have now dipped into the loss of earnings. You now have to, he went to the doctor, so you have to report it to the WSIB or the WCB. However, now you have a loss of earnings day, and that is where that 1.5 times premium. And what we like to do, and to give you some of the tools and techniques of what we do as a consultant and what we do as a business, is when an individual gets injured, when they go to the doctor, or you're filling out an internal incident report, we immediately get an offer of modified duties. Now, an offer of modified duties cannot be a text message that just says, hey, I have light work for you tomorrow, come into the office. The offer of modified duties has to have a couple components here. And there'll be some more information here on this, but what you need to have is, what are the working hours of your modified work? What are the specific tasks that they will be doing? And what is the wage rate? Those three components are the three components that you need for an offer of modified duties. I see a hand go up here. This might be a good time to ask for questions. Yeah.
Yeah, just in regards to the new rate, the modified work. If you do offer modified work or light duties, do you have to pay the regular rate?
Yeah, great question. So according to the worker compensations boards, you do not need to offer the pre-injury rate if you are offering your worker modified duties. So for example, if your plumber example, Johnny the plumber, if he's making $30 an hour and he sprains his back, and the doctor says he needs to be on light duties for 1 week, you can offer him what your typical wage rate would be for someone sweeping the shop, let's say $16 an hour. But at that point, the WSIB will top up that $16 an hour you're paying to his pre-injury rate, $30, and they will pick up the tab for $14 an hour. And as a consultant and as an advisor, that's that $14 for an entire week. Yes, WSIB is paying that amount, but you should see that reflection on your premium over the next few years be 1.5 times that amount. So it's advised to pay individuals their pre-injury rate. However, every business has its financial constraints, and also you pay into these insurance programs, so there's nothing wrong with using it. And that's where I like to use that rule of thumb. So as a business owner, cash flows are key. And if you're going into a seasonal downturn, and you have expensive trade workers or expensive professional workers that you may not be able to pay, then this is a great time to lean on these worker compensation boards. pay what you can, the fair rate of what it is for the modified work that they're doing, and let WSIB pick up that tab, especially when you're having cash flow or you want to, take advantage of the insurance programs that you already are paying for. But the quick answer to that is yes, as long as it's fair, and you're not just paying, minimum wage. You have to have some sort of internal reflection of similar type of employees who are doing that work and paying them similar. So fair pay for fair work kind of thing.
Maybe a follow-up question to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
What if Johnny just calls in and says, I don't want to come back to work, even if you have light duties for me? I just kind of want to kick around at home. I don't feel like it.
Yes, and you know what? We deal with that. I feel in the last 1 or 2 years it hasn't been too much, but 5 years plus, I used to deal with this a lot. Where Johnny the plumber, he likes to do plumbing. He doesn't want to sweep. He doesn't want to file or do paperwork or do light duties. He'd rather stay at home. The workers, as I mentioned before, we have three parties here. You have your injured worker, you have your employer, and you have your worker compensation boards, and each one has roles and responsibilities to play, and they also have rules that they have to abide by. And the worker's duty, they have in the legislation, they have a duty to cooperate. So if the employer has reasonable modified or light duties that they are offering to the worker, and the worker rejects those simply because they don't want to do them, they'd rather stay at home, I don't need the money, or I don't want to sweep, all I want to do is do my main job. At that case, they would reject your offer of modified duties. And as an advisor, that's where I would talk to the employee and tell the worker that if you reject this offer of modified duties, you don't get paid by the employer, but you also don't get paid your loss of earnings by these worker compensation boards. Their healthcare will still be covered, but when it comes to their loss of earnings, they're not going to get paid by workers' comp, and they're not going to get paid by the employer. And sometimes there's some confusion. Employees think that if they don't cooperate, then they'll collect a workers' compensation check. Well, those days are long gone. And so to answer your question, yes, the worker can reject the offer of modified duties. And if it's simply because they don't want to cooperate, they would trigger the non-cooperation rule. And as an employer, for everyone participating here today, this is where WSIB becomes your ally. WSIB will be the one to trigger this. It's not something that as the employer, you're going to have to fill out additional forms and additional calls and, sitting on hold for 20 minutes to kind of fight for not paying when a worker doesn't want to cooperate. These workers' compensation boards will trigger that, and they will take the lead. They will call the worker. They will, to a certain extent, they may even put a return to work specialist to help that worker and convince that worker to be part of this program. And they will make it crystal clear that they will not get paid. And then after that phone call, they will send them a letter that specifically says on their decision, we will not be paying your loss of earnings. And of course, the worker can appeal that. But overall, to answer your question, if the worker does not want to cooperate, you as the employer will not have a payment to make, and neither will these worker compensation boards. And pretty much they don't get paid at all.
Are you cool to kind of dive into a couple like interesting scenarios, unique scenarios?
Yeah.
Because we got some questions that are interesting. So what if Johnny actually got injured, not at work, but maybe he got injured like at the gym or playing with his kid, but he claims it was at work? Like, how do you broach that situation, or you suspect that situation?
Yeah, and that does happen. Unfortunately, across a lot of businesses, it's a numbers game. There are individuals who may not link, an appropriate injury to something that happened, or, like your example, you're at the gym the night before, you sprain your back, you don't tell anybody, but then you come into work and, you tell your supervisor or boss that, you sprained your back because you were lifting a box. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple ways to do this. One, typically when a worker is reporting an injury, your company should be doing an internal incident report. If they're not going to the doctor, if we're not reporting it to WSIB, we should still be filling out a 1-2 page report, where it happened, when it happened, and does the cause and effect make sense? But let's say it is a believable story. The worker does lift boxes for a living, and that would make sense. You can fill out your worker compensation board documentation, the employer's report, and every one of those forms has a little checkbox in it and says, I am concerned about the validity of this claim. And what you can do is you can make a small check mark there on that actual form, and it will ask you to make an attachment on the back. You could do it in Microsoft Word, or you could write it by hand, and you could write a little bit about it. And this has personally happened to me at a glass shop I worked at. I had some workers who used to go to the gym. They were big gym buffs, and they would go to the gym together. And I had one worker come back and say, hey, this one colleague of ours, he was lifting really heavy and he hurt his back. Maybe that's why he's not in today. And then I ended up getting a call from the worker about 30 minutes after saying, hey, I was on a delivery and I hurt my back. And I already had conflicting evidence that I knew he was at the gym. And I was able to report that to these worker compensation boards and say, I do have witness testimony saying that this individual did get injured. And then secondly, these worker compensation boards have matrices in the back end of their systems for their account managers to use. And it would say during these types of lifting, this is the typical type of injury, and this is typically how long or how injured that worker would be. And in conjunction, you would be able to work with these workers' compensation boards with your account manager and make your claim, whether you believe it's valid or not. Following this, they would send you their confirmation and their decision letter. If their decision letter says, we do not believe your claim, and we do believe that the actions that the worker was completing during their workday match the medical evidence, at that point, you'd be able to appeal that decision and try once again to make your case towards these worker compensation boards, to kind of unvalidate this workplace injury that had occurred.
Great. So this is accommodated for on the form, like you said, like right
Yes.
at the top, if you have that suspicion.
Yes, there's a specific box on each of the employer's forms for you to make that claim.
One more scenario for you. So what if Johnny again, our famous Johnny, who's getting injured all the time, what if he actually gets injured while picking something up from a vendor and gets struck by their forklift?
That's a great question. We deal with this a lot, and this is something that'll happen on construction sites, vendors, where someone else is responsible for your worker being injured. And this, I'll use construction. I guess we'll kind of change frame here and talk about construction. You're a trade contractor, Johnny, the plumber, and he's on a construction job site. And let's say some material from the drywaller falls down on Johnny. It's not his fault. It's you as a plumbing employer of this plumbing company. It's not your fault either. You did nothing wrong, yet your worker is still injured. Firstly, because they are your worker, your employee, you do have to fill out the worker compensation forms. That is your responsibility as the employer. However, similar to your other question, there's a specific component there that says, was anyone else responsible for this injury? And at that point, you would be able to say it happened on this job site and it happened on, with this other trade involved. And you would grab those numbers through your incident report, or you would talk to your builder on the construction site. From there, and typically a little something that we add, and this is a little bit of advice for everyone paying attention and being part of the seminar here today. On the last page, it'll add additional comments. And what you would say is you would reinterpret the story, the events that occurred, the schedule of events, and you would ask for a transfer of cost. This is something that's not really shared in this workers' compensation world, and it can be new to some of you. But transferring cost, your claim costs, to another company happens a lot in my world. And when other people are responsible for our workers being injured, we will submit the forms as required, but we will also request a transfer of cost. With the transfer of cost, it can be up to 100% of the cost, but sometimes both parties are at fault, and you could even claim a 50% cost, even to the point of if one of your workers slips and trips on the job site because another trade didn't clean up or they had bad housekeeping on the builder side, you would be able to transfer your costs there. And when you're transferring costs, another piece of tidbit information, you as the employer need to incur a cost before you can transfer it. So if your worker slips and trips, but they're back to work the next day and they didn't go to the doctor, then there's no actual cost to that claim. So there's nothing to transfer. And this works well when you're trying to create a return to work plan. And to your question before, do I have to pay the individual their full working rate while they're doing modified duties? And this is a technique when someone else is responsible, we still want our workers to participate in a return to work program. But if someone else is responsible, what we'll do is we will pay them that lower rate. the worker compensation boards will cover or top up the wage to what their pre-injury rate was. And then all of that monies, all of that income and loss of earnings that these worker compensation boards had given my worker, I will then take all of that and then I will do a transfer of cost and have that go on the other company's record books. So in total, me as a business, I am no longer paying Johnny the plumber $30 an hour. I'm paying him $16 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
The WSIB or Workers' Compensation Board is picking up the tab for the other remaining $14 per hour. And then after I get my claim statement of how much was paid out as loss of earnings, I will then transfer that to the other company responsible. So my worker gets their full amount. WSIB has played their part. Me as an organization, I have paid him or her a fair wage for the work that they were doing, but I'm not taking on additional costs because someone else had injured my worker. So those are little techniques that we use. And on that note, I do want to speak a little bit about another kind of hidden feature that nobody talks about. And I had to be in the consulting world for about a year before I was exposed to this. There's something called the CF Fund, SIEF. It's called a Secondary Injury Enhancement Fund. And this is for individuals who have a pre-existing injury and they re-aggravated injury that they had already had. So for example, let's say someone has knee surgery and then they come to work, the knee surgery was because of, they had bad knees or they had a hockey incident, not work related. 10 years later, they still have, a bad knee, but you employ them. If that individual re-aggravates their knee through a workplace injury, you can, on these forms, apply for the Secondary Injury Enhancement Fund. And any of the loss of earnings and medical that these compensation boards are paying to this individual because they re-aggravated a previous injury, you can apply for relief through the Secondary Injury Enhancement Fund, and that won't go against your record for Workers' Compensation Board. And all the loss of earnings paid to that worker will not be reflected in your premium increase. And this is in an attempt to reinforce that duty to accommodate. We believe here in Canada that we have fundamental human rights, and if you had a previous injury, that should not stop you from getting gainful employment in your career path just because of something happened in the past. And these are little tips and techniques, between transfer of cost and the Secondary Injury Enhancement Fund, we're able to recover a lot of these loss of earnings, which result in a substantial savings for the companies. We have an employer recently where we saved $25,000 just for 2022 by properly reporting injuries, getting workers on the return to work program, but also transferring costs and using the Secondary Injury Enhancement Fund when and if applicable. And using all of these tools and techniques, we were able to recover money back for the employer. And that's going to segue quite nicely into the other incentive programs. But these are things that I wanted to talk about here today. I want to share. You could, of course, do a little bit of research, Google research, or give us a call anytime, and we could go through a lot more detail. If you're currently dealing with a long-term return to work that, several months in the dealing, let's say, for example, someone, has a hernia or someone breaks their leg, something significant, and you're in the middle of this right now, organizations like ourselves can actually help out while you're in the middle of this and start helping you collect that loss of earnings all the way from day one. So retroactive, and we could actually help you get some of that money back, like right now as we're talking. A couple of things I do want to talk about is the questions at the bottom, as we might be running out of time soon. Can you offer modified work without a doctor's note? So worker hurts themselves, but the Johnny example, he throws away the doctor's form. The answer is yes. You can offer the modified work without seeing the medical proof first, as long as when you do receive medical, and that medical is different than your offer of modified duties, that you custom change that. Can you call the doctor? I get this question all the time. Am I even allowed to speak to the doctors? And the answer is yes. As the employer, safety manager, HR manager, operations manager, you are allowed to call the doctor. And what they'll do is they will give you the prognosis, not the diagnosis. So the doctors won't tell you what's wrong with the employee, but they will tell you what their limitations are and what they can and cannot do. And that works quite well with your offer of modified duty. So if Johnny accidentally throws away his doctor's form, you can call his doctor and you could say, hey, is Johnny able to push a broom? What are Johnny's limitations for lifting? Can he drive a car? Can he take public transit? You are allowed to have a discussion with the doctor. They just won't tell you what's exactly wrong. They will not tell you the results of the x-ray or the MRIs. And thirdly, can you ask the workers' compensation boards to not pay loss of earnings if the worker does not cooperate? We kind of talked about that in a previous question, but if you as a company offer modified duties or light duties to a worker and they reject it simply on the basis that they don't want to do it, at that point, whether yourself or the compensation boards will then trigger that clause of non-cooperation, and you will not have to pay that loss of earnings. So you don't have to worry that a worker gets injured, decides to watch Netflix for 2 weeks, that you're going to be on the hook to pay that bill. The answer is you won't be on that hook. And whether you trigger that event or, excuse me, the worker compensation board triggers that event, if you don't, then the worker compensation board will. So they'll have your back and they'll cover you in that situation. As we're running down, I do want to spend a little bit more time for questions, but I do need to talk about in Ontario and a couple other provinces, the different types of kind of rebate programs and financial incentive and programs that are available to you. So starting in Ontario, they have something called the WSIB. The actual board itself has something called the Health and Safety Excellence Program. It's a financial incentive program offered to support health and safety in Ontario workplaces. There's a lot more details to this, and it would be a little bit hard to kind of broadcast everything that's required. But in short, I have a little blurb here. You choose a topic. The WSIB will have a list of 20 topics. You will choose one topic, let's say leadership and commitment in the workplace. You'll develop policies, or you will enhance your current policies. And by working with the WSIB in Ontario, by improving your safety program, you could choose 5 topics to improve. And for smaller organizations, you can get $1,000 per topic per year. And for larger organization, the maximum you can receive is $50,000. So for companies that have, we have some large trade contractors with 400 to 600 workers. We've received almost $250,000 back from these financial incentive programs, plus $25,000 to $30,000 back from managing our workplace injuries and illnesses properly to come up with a net return of $300,000. And by making a small investment into let's say, full-time health and safety rep, or, partnering with a health and safety consultant, what we started finding out is that by putting the right pieces in place, not only can we build a safer work environment, a better safety program, but we were able to offset the consulting fees with the rebate fees. So ultimately, we were gaining the benefit of a safer program. We were gaining the benefit of having better return to works and a better WSIB rating. In the meantime, it didn't cost anything out of pocket because we were able to take advantage of the incentive programs. Outside Ontario, WorkSafe BC, WCB Alberta. For example, in Alberta, you can get a refund up to 20% of your premiums. And in BC, it's a little bit more case by case, but just to read out a couple things, it can be, let's say here, employers reported accessible payroll divided by 100 times 10%. It's not as clear cut as Ontario, where it'll say, minimum 1,000, maximum 50,000. There's a little bit of math that goes into it. I do want to put a small disclaimer here on the WorkSafe BC and WCB Alberta. You need to have a certificate of recognition. That is kind of the proof. So instead of choosing 1 to 5 topics to bolster your current safety program, you will actually need a provincial body that gives you a certificate of recognition. And typically that's very cumbersome and could take up to 1 or 2 years to actually achieve that certificate of recognition designation. However, once again, back to that same element of building a safer workplace, having a more robust health and safety program, and actually receiving a certificate of recognition, which is well known throughout all of Canada. By implementing, these different types of safety programs, finding a way to get premium rebates to offset the cost of building a safer work environment is really kind of the art of what I wanted to talk about and share with everyone here today. Is that, we want to shift people's mentality from, safety is a cost basin. All it does is it costs money for people to fill out forms. It costs money to deal with workplace injuries. It costs money to hire my consultant to do inspections and build me manuals. We really want to flip that on its head and say, if we can play the chessboard properly and we do it strategically, we can have all the benefits of building a safer work environment, but using the tools that are available, just not well known, we can offset a majority, if not the entire cost. And if not turn it into a profit center. And we've uncovered that for businesses with less than 5 individuals, especially in the professional space, for example, myself, a consulting firm, we were able to take advantage of these minimum incentive programs, offset our costs from WSIB, and now on our balance sheets, the WSIB shows as a profit center as opposed to a cost basin. And those are the things through this webinar, through further webinars. For any HRAI members here right now, you're already entitled to 1 or 2 free consultations with our team, with our staff, with myself. And if you just want to have a quick chit chat, or if you just want to talk, these are already what you're entitled to as being a member. And we're on a mission of awareness. And we feel that, the information that my team and I have that's common sense for us sometimes is brand new information to some of our clientele. And we want to share information. We want to make people aware. Our ultimate mission is creating safer work environments. And by sharing this information here today, showing you how you can make money, or you can have a better safety, more robust safety program at no real additional cost by the end of the year, ultimately helps us fulfill our mission. And, I believe that provides value to a lot of the individuals here listening, and it provides value as being part of the HRAI membership, that, we're here just to bring awareness and show you whether, not to make it a sales pitch, whether you want to retain or you want to do it yourself, both options are available, because ultimately our mission here is to create safer work environments. Other than that, I'm free to take some questions. I know we're at 2:47 now. I have time, but by all means, if there's any questions for me, I'd be more than happy to answer right now.
Fantastic. While they're typing it in, I got a couple more for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So, what about if you're working at a house, a residential area? How does that work when you go to file claims?
Okay. Yeah. So we spend a lot of time talking about business to business,
Mhm.
but I do know a lot of individuals will go and work in someone's residence on the HVAC side of things. You might do a furnace replacement or heat pumps. It seems to be the buzzword over the last year. And the rule of thumb, once again, big on the rule of thumbs. And I know in Ontario legislation, if you're a homeowner and you are doing a renovation, a retrofit where you have multiple trades on site at the same time, you are now considered a workplace and you are considered a general contractor. That homeowner is then responsible for ensuring that everyone does have insurance coverage and that their workers are covered under the Worker Compensation Board. And at that point, that residential house, if it has more than 1 trade at any given moment, so 2 trades at your house working at the same time, that residential owner now becomes a general contractor and will have to follow the same rules, the same reporting requirements, the same, return to work offer of modified duty. So great question there. Sometimes people feel, oh, I'm just doing residential houses. This may not apply. I'm not a big company. It does apply. And for any of the homeowners here who are doing some renovations at your house, if you have more than 1 trade working at the same time, ask them for their WSIB clearance certificate. Make sure that they are covered, because if not, you now take the role as the employer, and that would go under your house insurance. And if you're not properly covered, they might come get you personally legally liable for a worker getting injured at your own house.
That's something I would not know about. Yeah, thank you. What happens over time if you're a company that gets lots of workplace injuries? Is there a point at which you get in trouble? Does it accumulate? Like, what is the risk of that?
So the non-fault, the whole point here is we don't want to, these worker compensation boards don't want to punish individuals for reporting injuries. That's the generic rule here. If you punish individuals or companies for reporting, then there's a much higher chance that people will not report. However, like I had said earlier, if your workers are getting injured and are dipping into loss of earnings, so your workers are losing income, or they're requiring significant amount of healthcare costs like surgery and rehabilitation, you can expect to receive that 1.5, kind of number, that multiple on your premium. So like any good insurance company, think of if you got into a car collision, you use insurance, you kind of expect your insurance premiums to increase next year. Same kind of thing applies. But you don't get any criminal offense for reporting injuries. Like I had said earlier, if you're found negligent according to the Occupational Health and Safety Act, but that's a different legislation, different law. But when it comes to just reporting the injuries, no, you will not be in trouble or punished. There is something small I'd like to note as well, is that it does go on your record, and that record is actually public. And I'm not sure if people know this, but there's something called the Compass app. You can find that through your worker compensation boards. Compass, like, a navigation compass, and all of your injury rate data is public. So if you've received 5 trips and falls last year, a gentleman like myself, I could go on Google and I could find that out. I could find out what your injury rates are. I could have a quick look into what your injury rates look like. And if I was a developer and I had to hire 30 trades companies to come build me a high-rise tower, I would look into your injury rates. And if your injury rates were too high, I may make that decision to say that you're not a safe employer. So will you get in trouble by these worker compensation courts? No, but you will have legal exposure in the Occupational Health and Safety Act if you're found negligent, and you may have some financial exposure from the business aspect of other businesses not wanting to do business with you because your track record isn't necessarily the safest.
Thank you. Vito has a question. I think it's kind of like what we discussed, but I want to ask it anyways in case there's nuances to it. What about a delivery driver delivering a product in a residential home and potentially gets injured? Is that the same
yeah, that's a really nice little edge to the question that you asked earlier. So when so I guess I'll answer the question in two sides. So as the homeowner, that delivery truck driver, I'm assuming, is just kind of placing material on the driveway. Let's say like a dump truck is dumping gravel, or or you're using a boom to offset a skid. You might still be on the road, but you're not a tradesperson working inside the house. So as the homeowner, you would be okay. On the flip side, if you are doing a full reno, you do have a ton of trades out there, then that could be a little bit of a gray area, determining, was that worker simply doing a delivery, or were they delivering material inside the workplace and in conjunction with your trades individual? So the example would be, if you're just dumping gravel or interlock on their driveway, no, you wouldn't be exposed as the homeowner. If you were delivering, let's just say, HVAC material, and then your driver was bringing that to your HVAC installer who's inside the house, now we've kind of created a workplace environment, and that's where you can be exposed to it. From the employer's perspective, typically with the delivery truck driver, as long as he's not working hand in hand with the trade, if I was your advisor, I would say that that's a complete workplace. That would be the employer's issue, and I would not get the homeowner involved.
Great question, Vito. Thank you.
That was actually a really good question.
Those are the questions for now. If you have any follow-ups, where can people reach you, Dante?
So the best place for HRAI members is to check the member benefits profile. You can visit us online, Health and Safety, Toronto Health and Safety Consultants.ca. We will be doing a little bit more webinars through here. We do have some pages on the HRAI member portal. We also have our Instagram account at Toronto Safety, where we're continuously promoting different events, different posts, stories. We will be in the new year. We have a lot of collaboration opportunities in the HVAC world. A lot of it focusing on piggybacking off training programs already available. I have a lot of guest speaking events going on. And we will continue to update members through the HRAI newsletter. And that's probably the best way to find out what we're doing new, fun, and exciting, or staying tuned on Instagram. We try to make it a little bit more lighthearted. I know safety is a very serious thing, but sharing information, and if you can't have fun at work, then I think you're doing it wrong. So those are different areas that you can get a hold of us for sure.
Serious, but extremely important. So thank you so much, Dante. A lot of great information. Probably more than people could digest in one sitting. So if you want to watch this again, go to HRAI's YouTube. You can find, like I said, Dante's everywhere. And you can find him on the HRAI website as well. But thank you so much. And we will see you again shortly, I'm sure.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers.